Hey, Bright Lights. Welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. My name is Angela. I am an architect and a feng shui practitioner who has dedicated my entire career to studying design for well-being, something known as salutogenesis. Now, I always noticed, even as a young child, that space felt like something. And as I have worked over 20 years as a practicing architect, I absolutely have seen the evidence that space affects not only how we feel, but how we perform, even our health outcomes. So, this stuff is important and it doesn't get talked about enough, which is why I am here to bring you thoughtful weekly videos based on scientific research that is out there that you can put into action in your own life, at work, at home, within your community, or if you are a design professional in your projects. I'm really hoping to introduce a different way of not only understanding, but talking about these things so that we can all work together to have better spaces for living and thriving, not just surviving. So, to do this and make it really easy to understand, so you do not have to be a design professional to learn something and use it, I developed a deck of cards called my Salutogenesis deck. And the idea here is just to have a way to visualize what otherwise might be a complicated theory to help you remember it better, and then remember also how you can make some changes to space to get that concept to show up as needed. So the deck has two parts. The first part are foundational concepts. These are theories that come from sociology, psychology, neurology, anthropology. We are suffering from a lack of well being. What actually is going on in our mind and bodies when that happens? Of course, the antidote to that, salutogenesis, has five aspects, and that is the second part of the deck. And I've paired each of these aspects with an element from feng shui that only helps to enhance and enrich what they mean, how to use them, why they're important. And these aspects are five different theories that my research has shown complete a spectrum of well being. And so each week I will draw a card from one of those two parts of the deck, and I'll talk about the two cards together. And that's what makes this really fun. So you want to make sure that you like and subscribe because every single week is different. Also, when you subscribe, you're helping to spread this message because you're helping more people to find the channel and learn something and use the information as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first card that I drew from the foundational concepts of the deck is resiliency. Now you can see here, this is a concrete area that is not exactly friendly to growth, but there's a crack, and somehow, as we often see when there's a crack, a plant has managed to find a way to grow there. Well, this is a very harsh environment, not very welcoming. It's going to get very, very hot in the sun, much hotter from that concrete than soil would be. But this plant has found just enough that it can survive. And that is really what resiliency is all about, the ability to withstand and endure and bounce back after a setback. Now, there are five different types of resilience. You can have health resilience, social resilience, infrastructure resilience, environmental resilience, or economic resilience. Today, we are going to focus very specifically on social resilience. That means we can overcome experiences that are challenging our self worth. We can be comfortable with our social preferences, even if we might be told that we should be different. We can say, nope, this is who I am, and I feel good about showing up that way. I don't always need to have other people approve of me to be who I am. I will find my own people. I will find a way to thrive in the world regardless. So that is one part of social resilience, is being able to have a clear self-identity that we feel comfortable with, but also it is to have strong social connections so that when we do encounter a setback, we have a way to get support from other people. So this can look like having a robust group of friends or contacts that we can reach out to, having a sense of belonging, learning coping skills, which we do learn through socialization, seeing how other people handle things, having positive role models, and also shared experiences. So when I say we've encountered a difficulty, sometimes it could be personal, but sometimes a group of us can all have a shared negative experience and we can bond over that. Now, the card that I drew to pair it with comes from the prospect and refuge part of the deck. Prospect and refuge is a theory that J. Appleton devised, and it is about feeling safe and protected from a vantage point and being able to see prospects. So, what else is going on in the world? Do we want to engage with it or not? And to feel safe from where we are, that we are protected. It is associated with the earth element, and earth is all about stability, predictability, shelter, reliability, steadiness. So you can see why the two cards pair so well. Now, the particular card that I drew for Prospect and Refuge is the Social Choice card. Now, you can see on this card there's kind of a cave-like setting, and there are these stalagmites that are growing up that are zoning the space. And there's two kinds of spaces that you can see. There's kind of a focal point that you have a group gathered around, and then there's a little bit more solitary space where we see this figure who is kind of watching the group, but also choosing in that moment not to interact. And this is a really important part of prospect and refuge. So you can see that that person in the card who is in the solitary position has that prospect of the group, but they also have the refuge of their space and the choice to leave that space when they feel comfortable or to stay there if that feels right for them. The stalagmites symbolize that persistence, the resilience, the slow, steady accumulation of value over time as we build social connection. And there are really two kinds of spaces out there when we think about social choice. And this was an observation that was made by a psychiatrist named Humphrey Osmond as a system for patterning space. So there's sociopetal spaces that encourage interaction and contact, but they're also sociofugal spaces. Those are the ones that promote solitude, being alone. And it is very critical that we have both of those. This also goes into personality traits. Introverts and extroverts experience space in very different ways. And it's important to understand that extroverts get energy from interacting with others. They need those opportunities to meet people, to talk, to gather. Introverts are not necessarily adverse to socialization. A lot of people have that misconception. What is the difference, though, is that while an introvert may enjoy a social gathering and be very engaged in it, after a while, that is going to deplete their energy. The introvert needs the sociofugal space. They need that ability to find solitude, to ground themselves, and to reset. And when they don't have it, they're going to start to feel increasingly uncomfortable. Also, if it is a social situation that for some reason is feeling unsafe, maybe they're very nervous, maybe they're worried they won't fit in, you can't just throw an introvert right into the mix. That is only going to heighten their anxiety, and it's going to have the opposite effect of making the space lively and interactive or drawing out the best from that person. They're going to want to retreat and run away. So, giving them those sociofugal spaces gives them the opportunity to acclimate, to come in and settle and kind of scope things out before they make a choice whether or not they want to engage. The higher the level of extroversion somebody has, the more likely they are to look to perceive rewards in their environment. They're going to want that extrinsic validation. So it's going to be very important that they can interact and be rewarded, that they can see progress in what they might be doing. If it's a task, that they could display their work. If it's an office environment, that they can show off their personality and get other people to react to them. That's very important for the well-being of extroverts. Introverts, on the other hand, are more intrinsically motivated. So that means they don't really need other people to be recognizing them. In fact, in cases of extreme introversion, that actually will stress them out if you recognize their achievements or call them out. They really got their motivation from within. And so to keep an introvert more resilient, you need to give them those opportunities for quiet, focused work, for having the resources they need at hand, for not having to reach out more than they need to in order to get what they're trying to accomplish done. And there was a really interesting comparison of resiliency in extroverts versus introverts in a study done by Pavani back in 2021 that was about how introverts and extroverts respond to failure. And they actually, interestingly enough, found that introverts were more resilient because since they are intrinsically motivated, they can overcome the failure more quickly than an extrovert who sees the failure as something very public and very embarrassing. The introvert, because they are more internal with it, don't feel as exposed by the failure, don't really care as much how other people are perceiving them, and will actually see the failure as more motivation to keep trying harder versus a clue that they should give up. So I thought that was really interesting. But as we pair these two cards together and we think about the spatial implications of how do we promote more resiliency by offering more social choice, we really can think about how we can mix together these sociopetal and sociofugal spaces. So if we want to have more of those sociopetal spaces, think about things like a fire pit and how people will gather around and tell stories, or a round table where a group can gather, or spaces that promote more interaction. The ability to display your work here would be important. If you want people to meet one another in a social setting, having tables of 4 to 6 is the right number to really encourage the whole group to talk together and not just have several side conversations going on. Think about activities that can draw crowds and that will encourage people to speak with one another in that group. Now, when we think about sociofugal spaces, they can be spaces, even if they're public, where people are facing a single direction and not interacting with one another. So, a lecture hall, a church pew, that can feel very solitary, even if you are surrounded by other people. Spaces that enclose, like a carrel or an alcove or cubicle, where somebody can go and seek more isolation. You could think about secluded corners, lower ceilings, areas that are only big enough to fit 1 or 2 people, so that when someone sits there, it's likely that even if another person did decide to join them, it would be someone they know well, not a total stranger. Those opportunities for breakout spaces or private zones. These are the mix of spaces you would want to have, maybe in a classroom or school setting, in a library, in a public space like a park or a playground. It really is important. Even in early childhood, you will see children who want more interaction or want more solitude. So let's give that to them. And certainly, we've all experienced this in the workplace. We really need to support both kinds of spaces because we need both. And people are going to thrive when they can work in an environment that supports their well being. And if you found what you learned today helpful, again, don't forget to hit that like button and make sure that you subscribe. I hope you learned something really valuable today about how social choice promotes resiliency and how both of those things absolutely impact our well being. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.